We are back with the program Bottom Line from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. With me, Asimeu Bah. My guest today is Dr. Baofu. Has under his belt 180 academic books in all fields of knowledge, or has propounded more than 150 theories. Well, I know you are in awe to hear such news. Well, Dr. Baofu is that individual. He is an American scholar who has toured many countries in the world. His works stretch from nature, society and culture, and challenge nearly all existing conventional wisdoms from the natural sciences to the humanities. As a scholar, he has visited more than 150 countries, so his global exposure is exceptional. Well, this celebrated global scholar is visiting Sierra Leone and is my guest for the Bottom Line today. Welcome to the program, Dr. Baofu.
Good evening. How are you?
Okay, you are an icon when it comes to scholarly work. Like I said in my intro, you've written more than 180 academic books. You've also propounded more than 150 theories. That's unbelievable. How did that all happen?
Well, that's a long story. Let me first say thank you for having me. I have a very unusual motivation ever since I was a kid. I always wanted to understand everything, and that kind of intellectual motivation has been with me in my entire life. So that's just a shortcut explanation why I end up doing something like this, which is very unusual. And of course, the environment is also beneficial to me. So because I have been in many of the top schools and my family has been very supportive. So I think just a combination of genetics and environmental factors.
Did you come from a scholarly family?
No, in fact, I am the first person in my family who has a PhD. I'm also the first person in my family and also in my family history, I mean going back to 100 years, who pursue a intellectual career. In fact, that might be a good inspiration for many people in Africa and also in many other countries, because I did not come from a privileged family. I came from a family where intellectual pursuit was not part of the conversation in everyday life.
So what gave you that inspiration? What motivated you?
Because ever since I was a kid, I always did well in school. So I knew at that time that I was very interested in ideas, and that's what I was good at that time. I still am. So that was the explanation why. I think that's part of that is genetic. I think that, even if someone were to imitate me, I don't think that he could copy the whole thing, because part of that is genetic, but the other part is environmental, which of course anyone can learn from each other.
Okay. What was your first degree on?
At the beginning, I was trying to find out how many degrees do I want and which one should I work on first. So I started with economics and mathematics.
Okay.
Why this combination? That's because in economics nowadays, you cannot understand economics well if you are not good in mathematics. So I decided to study mathematics and economics. Why do I start with economics? Because I realized that many of the problems confronting the earth has a lot to do with poverty that we have to resolve. So I think that having a good understanding of economics can give me a good advantage to start understanding humanity. Then of course I went on to finish many other degrees, not just one. I also have a degree in, have a minor in mathematics, have a degree also in philosophy, have a degree also in political science, and I went on to finish many other things outside all these original subjects. So now 180 books, and I have been in all fields of knowledge, and I have provided contributions and visions and new theories about all of them, no matter what topic it is. So
you have a contribution in it.
Huh?
I said no. You said no matter the topic, and I said you have a contribution in that field.
Yes, and that's why in a way I am a polymath. That's what people used to call me. I also don't think as an inspiration to other people that you do not need to have a degree. You do not need to go to school to learn anything. If you are good in something, just do that something, because sooner or later you will be remembered. You will be known to be good at that something. Don't think that you need to have a degree. In fact, I can tell you quite a number of examples of people who shape human history. They don't have a degree.
Yeah.
In fact, some of them are high school dropout. There are quite a number of them.
So how would you describe your contributions to academia, to scholarly activities in the world?
I have provided more than 150 new theories and visions of the human future. If I had to classify them, I can, because we don't have time to talk about 150, that will take, weeks or months. I can classify them into two major categories, and then within each category you can subdivide them into subcategories, 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 and all that. One is theory, the other one is meta theory. Now, why do you need to study meta theory? And why do you need to study theory? Because no matter what you do in life, anything that you talk about, even the conversation that we have right now, we have not even started talking about theory.
Yep.
But in many of the conversation topics, discussion that we have so far, presuppose some theoretical frameworks. Even though we don't talk about them, it doesn't mean that they are not there. They are there already, but they are hidden until you look at them and you touch them. Then you realize that you are using them too, in one way or the other. There's a joke that people who dismiss theory is often a slave of theory himself, because he doesn't even know what he's using. Now, meta theory, why? Because any theory is not just out of the blue. It also presupposes some assumptions, okay? Those assumptions in many cases are about meta theory, theory about theory. Meta theory is the foundation of a given theory. Then instead of studying this theory, now you go into the foundation of this theory, you talk about meta theory. So to understand a theory well, you have to understand the meta theoretical foundation, just like a house. You want to understand this house, fine, look at the ground and what is the foundation of your house, because if you don't have a good foundation, it will collapse sooner or later. So you need more.
But theories are not sacrosanct. Theories can be propounded and they can be debunked as well by others.
Sure.
So, do you normally look at certain theories that have been propounded in the past and debunk them, and also bring out your own? Do you normally debunk theories? For example, if you let's say, for example, Thomas Hobbes is one of the early thinkers who, for example, who proposed that man in the state of nature.
Yeah.
He said, a state without law is like a man in the state of nature, where might is right.
Yeah, British and short.
British and short. Yeah.
No, I'm not his fan.
And when you look at Thomas Hobbes' theory, it was countered by John Locke, who believed that man in the civil society was civilized, was not barbaric as was painted by Thomas Hobbes.
Yeah, then maybe we should talk about the second part of my introduction, theory and meta theory. This question is more about theory over here, because now under theory I classify them into 4 subcategories in relation to the mind, in relation to nature, in relation to society, in relation to culture. And in each of these categories, I subdivide them into further subcategories.
Wow. Let's look at it one by one. Let's start with culture.
Okay, I will answer your question about Thomas Hobbes and John Locke and all that, but there's more about about society in theory, but I will go back to that. Now, culture. Yes, there are a lot of things that I have proposed in culture. Let me give you some examples, because we don't have time to talk about 150 theories. I also make a prediction that sooner or later human civilization will not last. It will be replaced by what I call post-civilization. Now, what does that mean? That means that many of the civilizational foundations that we have so far have not been working well. For example, the distinction between civility and barbarity have been used to the point that we try to kill other people, attack your enemy, in the sense of we want to civilize them, or we enslave people in the name of civilization, just like the Europeans came to Africa and said, yes, we want to come here to liberate them, to civilize them. In that name, look at the horror. Look at the brutality, the exploitation, the ruthlessness. This kind of civilization that we have unearthed in the last 2,000 years, many of them will not survive, because they are just in many ways, in the name of civilization, things turn out to be the most brutal in the name of civilization. In fact, many people who enslaved, who practice, who somehow supported slavery, they are also part of the European Enlightenment thinkers. Enlightenment, by the way, think about including your the people that you mentioned, John Locke, and many of those people, by the way, and John Locke and many other people at that time, they are part of the Enlightenment thinkers. And the Europeans at that time, the colonizer, they were also they started in that era where they think that in the name of civilization we can spread out, and that's why one of my former professor at Harvard University in Cambridge, and I worked with him, I was his teaching fellow, and he once said that in his publication that there are 3 G's for European conquest of other countries. One of them, for example, is God. God over here means you spread Christian religion, you try to civilize them. Now, he's not saying that it's the right thing to do, propaganda, you understand it, that they use this idea so that they can justify all this kind of exploitation, slavery, brutality, violence, killing, massacre, rape, and all that. So I think
the
that
second G is what? The first one is God.
The second one is glory, and the third one is gold, which means that the Europeans, they want to gold, which means that they come to a country, they loot all the resources, they cannot pay for it, but they enslave you, make you work day and night, they rape the black women. In fact, in America, we have the black slavery. Many people do not know that at that time, the British and many other people that they colonized, they also practiced a sex factory. What they did is that they will pick certain black slaves and pick certain black women, okay? And they will choose the one that they want, which they think that they can produce a very productive, very strong slave, so that the slave can work day and night without getting tired. They will force them to have sex, okay? Force them to reproduce. That's a sex factory, okay? Can you imagine Africans have a sex factory in Europe? Could they allow that? No, they did that to you. And could they be happy if you did that to them? But how could they justify this kind of brutality to the point that is like horrific? Now, so I said that the human civilization that we had will not last. It will be replaced by what I call post-civilization. The post-civilization is questioning the very foundation of human civilization. The distinction between barbarity and civility has to be overthrown. And I think that in future civilization, people will look more into this kind of dichotomy and need to transcend beyond civility and barbarity to the point that many of the things that we have been doing on Earth will not survive. And things need to be much more spiritual too.
So who is going to spearhead that post-civilization?
Well,
according to your prediction.
Well, I'm one of the founding fathers. So in human history, any new ideas, you must have someone who write about it, who propose about it, right? It must start somewhere, right? So if you ask me who is going to do that, well, I consider myself as a founding father of that new idea, not just one idea. I have 150 of them. So if you ask me, then someone has to start somehow. So I have started already. I published this book about 20 years ago already. But sooner or later, it will pick up, and there will be some other followers in the future. I consider myself as a visionary. Many of the visions that I have are far ahead of time.
Would you be around to see some of these visions?
Some of them, yes, and then maybe I shall go to society now, because under the category of society, I also make a prediction that capitalism will not last. It will be replaced by what I call post-capitalism, and democracy also will not last. It will be replaced by what I call post-democracy. Okay. In the name of democracy, many so-called democratic countries have been invading so many other countries, killing so many other people. In the name of democracy, in the name of human rights, they are violating the most human rights. in the name of human rights. Okay.
So, I mean, what comes to mind, for example, is the West. Most time people say they talk about democracy, they preach about democracy, they want to export democracy, but I mean, what they do in other countries is far removed from democracy.
That's because people asked me this question before. Just for clarification, democracy was not invented by the West. It's part of the colonial propaganda. East Asian civilization, even before the West, already had their own version of democracy. Okay, except that the Western scholars during the age of European colonization, they rewrote history. It dismissed all the contribution by the non-white.
I mean, they change. They give their own
idea. So whatever they make, they will say whatever they say, and say the beginning of that is always originated in ancient Greeks. Okay, even though it did not. In fact, many of the origination, if you look at that carefully, ancient Greeks did not say much of anything about that. But if they say a tiny thing, they will exaggerate that, dramatize that, and say this is the beginning, but they ignore the contribution by non-white. You understand me? In East Asian civilization, especially in China, for example, there are already a lot of different understanding of political life. Okay, the notion of mandate, for example, now we talk about democracy, right? So the person who get elected, they must understand the mandate of the people who elect you, right? But the notion of the mandate was already there in East Asian civilization. Let's say in Chinese classics, people talk about the mandate. A good example is Confucianism, for example, and now they even follow that in many other cases, but they dismiss that and say they are not quite democratic. But whatever they did 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece, they are always democratic. So it's part of. Now there is a joke in Africa that I learned by some people, is that if lions were able to write, they could rewrite history too. You understand the joke?
Yep. Sure.
In Africa, there's a joke. Lions cannot write, but the joke is, if lions were able to write, I'm sure they could rewrite human history according to everything begin from the lions and end with the lions.
Okay, I mean, you said many of these things are going to be replaced. For example, civilization is going to be replaced by post-civilization. Is it in connection with what is normally said about it, that history is cyclical?
No. Now,
do you believe in that theory, that history is cyclical?
Yes, I understand that. There's another theory, another vision. This one is about meta theory. Remember, I'm not a founding father of one vision, one theory, like Karl Marx about communism, Adam Smith about capitalism, Sigmund Freud about psychoanalysis. Everyone has one, and Jesus Christ about Christianity, Buddha about Buddhism. Everyone has one, and then they will use that to explain everything. I'm not like that. And I think that kind of era is over. The world that we live in is not so simplistic. So going back to what you said, do I believe that human history going through a cycle? Does history repeat itself, so to speak? Yeah. Now, in the category of meta theory, I have proposed 3 or 4 meta theories, which are the foundation of all human knowledge in the future. And one of them I call the existential dialectics, and there are about 77 principles, or 78 now, because from time to time I propose some new principle. One of the principles is that I have proposed for the theory to understand reality, the nature of reality. By the way, just in case you don't know, this is about ontology in metaphysics. So one of them is to say that if there is anything which is cyclical, there's also something which is linear too. So if you ask the question, does history repeat itself? And according to the principle in existential dialectics that I propose, if history repeats itself, it also does not repeat itself. Because if you look at human history, there are many things that they seem to repeat itself, but there are also many things which they do not repeat itself. So the answer to your question is not either or. By the way, the reason I call the theory dialectics, because it's not a question of either or. The notion of either or is a question of symbolic logic, for example. Classical logic is very symbolic. It's very one-dimensional. Either this or that. Either A or B. Either affirmation or negation. I question that fundamental logic of human life that we have understood so far. I question that to understand that is also had to be questioned too. And I propose something going beyond the classical distinction between, let's say, in this case, classical logic, either or the dialectic one.
About Baofu, what's your thinking about religion?
This one is about culture. I was thinking to talk to you about this too. I also make another prediction in my book of publication that many of the religions that we have so far on earth, you can talk about Christian religion, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and all that, and many other local religions in Africa and the Oceania and the Caribbean and all that. Many of them will die out sooner or later. Why? Because now this also in relation to another theory that I have about the mind that we have not talked about that yet. The reason is because the human mind, human beings as we understand it, like you and me, will not survive anymore. It will become extinct.
So what's going to replace it?
And that's my next point, which is that it will be replaced by what I call post-humans. Post-humans, those people are not humans anymore. They take different forms, and I have proposed different visions about what those future beings are going to be, and those beings will need some new religions. Because their mind,
so you mean the human race is going to be extinct?
Yes. Now, it's going through different stages. It's not like by tomorrow morning it will be a new life. No, evolution takes a long time, but this time it's not just natural evolution, it's also technological evolution, spatial evolution.
Is Darwin's theory about this?
I propose different forms of post-human. It depends on different stages, in the short term, in the medium term, in the most distant term. So it will go through different forms. So in the short term, we see some of them already. Now we talk about AI. Now we talk about cyborgs. Now we talk about humanoids.
So are they part of what you are envisaging, what you are predicting?
Yes, but those in the short term, we will see more and more like this. AI is a good example. DeepSeek is another good example. In fact, we don't even need to talk about it. In China now, even back in the 1980s or in the 1990s, I'm not sure if you remember, Deep Blue, there's an IBM machine. They competed with a grandmaster in chess. The machine beat the grandmaster.
Well, those machines, even we are talking about, so they are being controlled, are being fed by human beings.
Well, you put in the data,
yep.
Okay, but we are talking about the capability for the machine to figure out all this kind of connection of the move. That is the contribution of the machine. If you put a move, okay, I have to enter the move into the machine so that the machine can understand that now you are moving to here. So the machine has to figure out what is my next move. And the machine will say, my next move is this. And then the programmer, is going to say, okay, now the machine wants to go over here. But the machine does not tell, the programmer does not tell the machine to move here to counter you. The machine has to make the decision. That fact already shows that they are much better human, but it's only the beginning. Even your computer, for example, nowadays, you may not remember what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but your computers will remember exactly what you wrote, what is in the file, the date, the content. You open the file, it's just right there in front of you. Can you imagine a future machine becomes so intelligent that you can ask him a question, he can remember exactly what happened? If you ask him, okay, or logical reasoning, he can figure out things quickly in a way that you cannot. So in a way, they have already surpassed human, except that in some cases, but there are many other things that we are still better than they are. But I'm just saying that if you look farther into the future, we are not there. They will be, in fact, they are moving out to the outer space too.
Okay, continue to be with us. He is Dr. Peter Baofu, who is an American scholar who has traveled more than 150 countries and has written more than 150 books, and also he has propounded 150 theories and more. Well, he is a respected global scholar. The program you're watching is Bottom Line, coming to you live from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation with me, Asimeu Bah. We are going for a short break. After the break, we are back. We are back with the program Bottom Line from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. With me, Asimeu Bah. My guest today is Dr. Peter Baofu. Now, Dr. Baofu, in some of your works, you also focused on the global politics, the issue of geopolitics, whether in the West versus the East, the West versus Africa, how resources are being fought over, how resources are distributed, how countries are positioning themselves to have control over resource-rich countries. Under what category does that fall under? You're for the issue of culture, society, mind, and nature.
I have also proposed different theories. This one is under society.
Okay.
You asked a question about, let me give you one example. Many years ago, I made a prediction. It was in 1995, my PhD dissertation. I predicted at that time, it was about more than 30 years ago. I said that China could become a dominant superpower on Earth, not the US, not the EU. And then a few years later, I wrote another book. The title is Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order, in which I also make a prediction that China and India will dominate the international relations, not the US anymore, not the EU, not Russia, not Japan, not like that. And I talk about how the rest of the world will have to come to cope with this new world order. Now, at that time, when I did the presentation in 1990, you could imagine, no one listened to me. Now, as a visionary, I get used to that, because as a visionary, by definition, you see far ahead that other people do not see. Because they do not see, they have to dismiss you.
What gives you that lens? What gives you the foresight to see?
Yes. I think that it's just like a chess. I once wrote a book on chess, by the way, and I do a lot of research on grandmaster. Okay, I'm very interested in how could they, if you make a move, a grandmaster, sometimes they can see ahead of you. Okay, if I counter this and counter this, and then if he can see a few steps ahead of you, then he can defeat you. Because you cannot see it as far as you can see it. If I pick a counter move, you can only see that I counted this, maybe if I do this, you will do this. But if you can see a bit further up, then you lose, because he put you in a trap, and you could not see that. And you could dismiss me before that and say, okay, no problem, I can deal with that. But you are in a trap already.
So is that the situation at the West?
Yes.
Russia and others have found that.
So what I'm trying to say is that how do you see it far? I think part of that is that the more you study, become an expert on something, you can see things that many other people do not see, because in a way you are specialist on that something. But on the other side, it's a human mind, that some people have an unusual mind. So not everyone has the capability, even if you study a lot. So I think that I have that kind of combination. I work too much. But on the other side, I also have some privilege that other people may not have. So the two add together will make that contribution. Now, going back to about the international order, and in fact now more and more things are happening according to what I said that it could be. In fact, I also made another prediction about the Second Cold War. Some years ago, I made a prediction that the Second Cold War is emerging between the US and China. And it was in early days of the Trump administration. At that time, I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about the first one. No one talked about that yet. Okay, it was like the COVID-19 at that time. So no one talked about that. I made the prediction. I said that this is the beginning of a new Cold War. You know what? No one paid attention to me. No, I gave presentation. No one paid attention to me also. But nowadays, especially in 2024 and 2025. A lot of people talking about that almost every day. So this is exactly what the visionary is. You must be ahead, because if they do not see it, they must miss you, because they do not see what you see. How can they accept you? But history will give you the credit.
Okay, history will give you the credit. Now, let's talk a bit about international politics.
Yes.
What is happening now in the United States, for example, the issue of tariffs that President Trump has imposed on countries, especially China, which is the largest one of the largest countries that produces for the world. It has created, like what you said, the issue of almost a cold war between the United States and China. How do you think the United States or President Trump is going to come out of this stronger?
I have also written quite a lot of articles about him and also about the U.S. in this regard, and I also written about his psychology, his political personality. So to answer your question, do I believe that what Trump is doing will make America great again? The answer is no. He's destroying America in many ways. But you have to understand, the problem now is not because of Trump in many ways. With Trump or without Trump, this will continue, by the way. But my point is that the more fundamental thing that you have to understand is that America is no longer dominant. That is the problem. Let me give you some examples to show you why America is going broke. America has the largest debt on earth, more than $36 trillion or something like that. So a lot of previous politicians have been proposing different solutions. Maybe we can keep printing money. Well, the more you print, the more inflationary it will be. And number one. And number two, sooner or later, some people will question, will I get the money back? Or if I invest in you, you keep printing money, sooner or later, the worth of my return may not be much, even if you pay me the interest now. The problem now is that look at the stock market crash last week. Okay. Now the funny thing is that normally when you have the stock market crash, the bond market is doing much better. Why? This is the destruction that Trump doesn't understand because he's a businessman. He's not an economist. When you have a trade deficit with other countries, that means that country earns money from you. So in the case of China, China is investing all this money back to the U.S., the U.S. Treasury, corporate bonds, and many other things. So the U.S. have a capital surplus with China in the last few decades in order to balance out the book. Think about it. I'm not sure if anyone can understand this kind of a tricky part. In economics, in finance, in this case, you have to balance the book each year. How can you balance? If you keep spending money, where does the money come from? If you're spending so much, I buy this, you buy this, fine. Who gave you the money to keep spending like this? Money must come from somewhere, right?
It must have a source.
Maybe from your mother, your father, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. I don't care, from your income, from your job. It doesn't matter. The point is, money must come from somewhere. Where does the US get all this money to pay for all of this, all these years, ever since the 1970s? The answer is, many of them are from foreigners. They have trade supplies from the U.S. They reinvest those money. That's why the U.S. has been benefited tremendously by this kind of relationship. Now, and that's why the French president many years ago, he's not alive anymore. I think his name is what's his name, Giscard d'Estaing or something like that. He called that the exorbitant privilege of the U.S. They mean that because of the U.S. is accepted as the international reserve currency, the problem is that what Trump is doing is to destroy that status. It's going to be damaging to you because the U.S. dollar is no longer demanded, it's no longer needed. Before, everyone is demanding dollars because now they have American dollars. They put this back to you, but now you're saying no, so that no one has American dollar from you because they have no trade supplies with you. So they mean that the demand for American dollars will be less. That means that the status of American dollars as the reserve currency will be less. Trump's threaten other people, do not ever stop using American dollars. I'm going to put tariffs on you. But how can you do that at the same time? Where do people have the money to keep using American dollars?
Okay, Dr. You travel to countries, and when you go to countries, you observe, you read, you think, and you provide solutions to their problems. And what have you thought about Africa?
I spoke a lot of Africa, so people ask me a lot of questions. We can talk about different issues about poverty, unemployment, inefficiency, corruption, insecurity. I mean, there are so many issues that we can talk about. But one thing I want to point out very quickly is that things had changed. If you look into the few decades before, because of the Western colonial legacy, Africa had been ignored in the last few decades. I mean, no one, when the West was in control about international affairs, they did not pay much attention to Africa. They only want to control, exploit, and use the resources, but there's not much development. Now, in the last 10 or 20 years, things are start moving a little bit more. Why? Because of China. Unlike the colonial powers, they come in, they colonize, they enslave, they regime change, they occupy, they send military bases, they control this and control that. China has been investing a lot of, let's say, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Roads, bridges. Now that you go to Africa, everywhere you go,
See Chinese infrastructure.
Look at the new roads, bridges, hospitals, clinics, ports, whatever. The chances are built by China now. Where does the money come from? Number one, you borrow from them, right? But in many cases, at the end of the day, many African countries say, we don't have money to pay back. Can you either reschedule or you cancel them? This is exactly what China has been doing. So what did the Chinese government do? They pay the Chinese company the money for you. So at the end, the Chinese company do not go bankrupt because you do not pay, but the Chinese government pay them for you. And part of that is also because
exploitation of resources.
Yeah. Okay. That is about the cancellation of that. But there's another dimension. The other dimension that in some other cases there is a change. Let's say I pay you the money and you give me the resources. There's trade, right? Okay, fine. There's also, but now it's about corruption. Look at Nigeria. Each year, Nigeria has exported so much oil. Okay, they earn a lot of money. Now the question is, where does the money go? Look, if all those money were used fairly, democratically, for everyone, Nigeria could be very wealthy right now for its own people, but Nigeria suffered one of the worst rates of poverty in Africa, in spite of the fact that they have exported so much oil, have earned so much money from all those countries, including China, to buy all those oil. Now we need to talk about corruption, how to fix. So my point is that, and also about the debt. Many people do not know that 3/4 of the debt that Africa owns right now, they are not with China, they are with Western powers, especially private debts. If you look at the total debt that Africa now has, all foreigners, the majority is not from China, it's from the Western powers. But because they are private, people don't talk too much about it. And when you ask a private company or a loan investor to cancel that, they refuse. Because they are private companies. Now, if you ask the Chinese government, there's a government, the government says, okay, I will pay for it for you. So now, but Africa has asked Germany, France, UK, America, can you cancel that? None of them is willing to cancel. Germany, for many years, refused to cancel anything, not even one dime. This kind of mindset is very capitalistic. And look at Greece. You have the Greek economic trouble, right? In the last decades or so, right? They have been working with the IMF, the World Bank, and all that, trying to reschedule and finance. Look at how many people protest on the street. And even ask Germany to cancel all the debt that the Greek people own. Germany say no. No way. We're not going to cancel that. Why? Because those are private companies and the government is not willing, because the government is also capitalistic. So this has changed so much now because of this dynamics. So now more and more, you see all the economic growth rates of quite of the number of African countries, they have been doing much better, but they are not for everyone. Some countries are still in civil war, insecurity, poverty, corruption, inefficiency. But the point is, things are also looking up too.
Okay, what entices you to visit a country?
I have no desire to visit a country just because I need to visit the country. My point is that I need to visit all of them to understand humanity, and that is a prerequisite and imperative of my research about humanity. Look, I have the choice to stay in the library in my country and just read a book or watch a documentary about Sierra Leone. I could do that too, but I prefer not to do that because I learned something from my American professors when I was in school, in college. and many of them have never done what I have done, and I have the intuition that many times when I spoke with them, I could not accept what they said because they seem that they are not that aware of some of the
realities.
Yeah, the reality in underdeveloped countries, and many of their viewpoints are very Western-centric. So when I challenge them, sometimes they get angry with me. So I said to myself that, look, when I finish, I would like to go out and look things for myself, and I don't want to read as much as they did, because many of those books are published by people before them. They are also thinking the same thing too. So I would like to see something firsthand by myself and see, and I discovered that things
So
what the mass media have been talking about.
You're staying in Sierra Leone. Where have you visited?
I have been here only for a few days. I have not been like here for 5 years or 10 years, so I have not been traveling as much as probably you have. Only a few days doesn't mean much of anything, but normally I often go into different regions and different neighborhoods and try to look at things. I don't need to talk to people if they cannot talk to me, but just go walking around, see the poverty, the slum areas. By the way, not far from here, you see the slum areas near the river.
Yeah.
Here, you see, it's not far from here. You don't need to visit so far away in order to see what is going on. So in one neighborhood you see nice, but then you watch not far from the other one, you may say maybe it's not good for me to stay here because it can be dangerous for me. But I also walk into this kind of neighborhood because you have to see the reality. It is the reality that people don't want you to see anyway. But as a researcher, this is what I do.
So when you end some of these visits, when you return to the United States, you think and you develop another theory, you write another book?
Oh, I have been writing a lot of things constantly. Yes, I have been doing that, but I also propose a lot of new ideas and new thinkers, because things also keep changing all the time too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to keep pace with what's going on, but the overall dynamics does not change too much. But the tiny little things will change. So what's going to happen to Trump, let's say in the next few days or next few weeks, he will change this or change it. Yes, all these tiny little things, yes, but do not let that distract you and lose the overall picture. It will not change too much. The overall picture is that America is in decline.
America is in decline.
Yes.
Okay, so what's your prediction? Now let me take you to another sensitive issue before we end this program. You look at the Israel-Palestine war. Have you proposed any theory around that?
Yes, I also propose a lot of different things. One thing is about Israel, which is not very popular for me to talk, because in the US now, because of the Jewish lobby, I'm not sure if you understand what
I know the Jewish lobby.
Okay, and not only that, I also read a book, an article about that too. It's not just so simple about the Jewish lobby, but the Jewish lobby certainly has something to do with that. And what I'm trying to say is that what Israel is doing in the Middle East right now is very self-destructive. You can use force, which they have because of the US military. In fact, many of those weapons are provided to Israel, and many of them are free. They do not pay for it. And the US give them a lot of money each year. Okay? So that's why the US has been accused to be an accomplice of genocide. Because without the US military weapon, Israel could not do what they have done. They couldn't even survive for more than a few weeks, because all those weapons, all the support, all the intelligence always come from the US. Okay, the aircraft carriers are there, the intelligence sharing are there, everything is there for them, politically, economically, military, financially, everything. Now, the reason that it's self-destructive is because Israel can use force to engage in genocide about the Palestinians in Gaza. They can kick them out. They have the power, and they are doing that with no mercy. Okay, fine. Lebanon, they are trying to do that with the Hezbollah. They want to kick them out too. Syria, they want to occupy now the Golan Heights. Now, do you know that Israel has been occupying some territory illegally and condemned by the United Nations? Yeah. They are expanding. There's the colonial expansion. Now, the problem is, as I said in my publication, force in human history, you can use force, but force often doesn't work in the long term. People will fight you back. Look at India, for example. India was fighting the British Empire, but Gandhi said, I'm going to fight, but I'm not going to fight with you with guns. Okay, and that's why now they have been accused by the International Criminal Court of committing genocide. And Netanyahu was under he was now, of course, if he went to the US or he went to Hungary and all that, they will not arrest him because of the Western, it's politics, dirty politics. But if he were to visit or some African countries, real bad, people are going to look up to him. Now, how come they did not say anything in the US when he visited the US? Because of geopolitics. But if Putin were to visit the US, Putin was also have the same arrest warrant. Why do you have this kind of double standard? The reason is international relations. It's not always about double standard, triple standard, quadruple standard, pattern standards, and all that. It's always about dirty politics. It's right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter Baofu. I think we're gonna end this program here. Our time has passed spent. Thank you very much for being my host for today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I wish I had more time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, he's Dr. Peter Baofu. Well, as you know, he has a very rich CV. Someone who has traveled to more than 150 countries, written academic books, more than 180, propounded 150 or more theories. Well, I mean, you can't have a man who has a rich CV than him. Well, that's how we end this edition of my program. Bottom line, thanks to all my producers and colleagues who have been working behind the scenes. Still we join you again for a fresh edition of this program next week. God bless you. Goodbye. Don't forget to join us again next week, but this program is going to be repeated on Saturday at 2 p.m. Till we join you again, I've been your host, Asimeu Bah. God bless you. Goodbye.